Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I'm here for another FAQ, and today it's about what is the shelf life of ... question mark. And it's specifically going to be about your dairy products and your meat products. And I'm talking about the dried stuff. I'm not talking about pressure canned and water bath canned stuff. I'm talking about dry goods only today. And so frequently asked question like on the meat, how long, what is the shelf life of? Now, even though I talked about it in the videos I put out on the chicken and the burger, I wanted this to be more specific so I could link you back to this. And then I did a video that at the time that I'm shooting this had just published the other day about the dairy products. Now, here's the thing. A lot of these particular products like the butter powder, the heavy cream powder, and the white cheddar powder, those are new products to me. And so I can't guarantee what the actual shelf life is. But apparently, when it comes to the packaging like this that it's in, it's said to last, I don't know if they're all the same, but it's said to last for about a year. And some of them might only be a few months. But from my experience of dealing with whole milk powder that I bought years ago, I started buying the goat milk, the powdered goat milk whole in the cans, and that's, what is it, Meyerberg, I think it is. And I have a whole bunch of that stored up, and it's been stored for maybe 4 or 5 years. And I know the last can I opened was still good. So in that packaging, because of it's vacuum sealed in this can, it can last for a long time. It may only say on the packaging it will last a year, but it is still good. As far as this, now I wouldn't think the shelf life in this, even though it's sealed, because it's plastic and it's clear, I just don't think the shelf life is going to extend much longer than what it actually says. Now, I did see some people say that theirs went rancid after a period of time. And when you're talking about things like buttermilk like I have in here, and the heavy cream powder and the cheese, those have got a lot of fat in them. So you're more apt to see those things go rancid. However, I honestly believe that if they're stored properly, they can last for a very long time. Now, the problem with storing them in jars like I have here, I have these all vacuum sealed, is that, and by the way, I did a video on how to vacuum seal into jars when you're talking about powdery things, and you'll see right there, there's a piece of cloth, but I'll go ahead and link to that video down below if you're interested. And by the way, that's in the description box. Don't forget to click on either show more or the little gray arrow right below the screen over here if you are on a smart device. So anyway, as long as it's vacuum sealed and kept in a cool, dark area, I believe, and this is just an assumption on my part, it should last for many years. Now, I did talk about the Judy's whole milk powder. I think it must be back in stock again now. Last time I tried to buy it, it wasn't, and so then I went back to the Hoosier Hill brand whole powdered milk. They're both very good. And the Judy's comes in a Mylar bag already. So I've just stored it like that in the bag, in a dark cabinet. And the ones I pulled out and used, they've always been good. I haven't had any problems with it. The only milk I've ever had go bad so far has been the non-fat milk that I had stocked up on, and it was in just a plastic bag. It was a good quality one, and it was organic, but it was just in a plastic bag, and I didn't bother to repackage it into something vacuum sealed like a jar or even in a Mylar bag. And yes, you can use Mylar bags. With those, I recommend throwing in an oxygen absorber in that case and then sealing it real good. But you know, if you're not going to use a jar like I'm doing here. And that's the nice thing about Mylar bags. I think I'm actually thinking about getting back into using those, is they're going to take up a lot less space. And they are dark. They're going to keep the light from getting in, because the light is going to degrade your stuff. So whenever you're talking anything that's in jars like this, you want to store them in a pantry, in a place somewhere where it's going to stay dark with very, very little light exposure. I personally believe these will last for years in the jars like they are. I wouldn't leave them in the container like this for long-term storage. But this one is in here because this is the one I'm working through, because I'm trying I'm trying out various different things, so I haven't bothered to repackage that. Some other options you can consider is freezing, but then again, you're going to talk about taking up a lot of room in your freezer, and the whole idea of getting the powders is to have something that's going to have a long-term shelf life. And so again, I feel certain at least a year on all these, but I do believe as long as you keep this vacuum sealed and in a dark storage area, it's going to last much longer than that, like the goat milk I've had for many years, and the Judy's whole milk powder that I've gotten the packages that they came in. Still good just the way they are. There was another cheap one that I bought that was in a foil pack that went bad. And mostly, I don't think they went rancid. They just got, one of them actually got weevils in it, which is weird because weevils aren't usually an issue for us here. And the other one just turned hard like a rock, and there was like pretty much nothing you could do with it, and you could tell just by the smell. Maybe it was rancid, it just, the smell was a little off, so it probably was rancid. So the cheaper packaging, you definitely want to repackage in that case. And it's funny that the ones I had the most problem with were the non-fat ones. Now, I did, by the way, years ago, I used to buy buttermilk in a box, and I just kept it in the box it was in. I opened it up, I'd used it, and I worked all the way through it and never had problems. And it took me probably a few years to work through that box of buttermilk and never had any problems with it, because when I was growing up, my mom would keep powdered milk on hand for whatever, and it was the non-fat kind, and I hated it, but you know, sometimes we'd run out of milk and she forgot to go to the store or whatever, and that was what there was. And that's how she did it. She just worked through the box that it came in, and it never went bad as far as I remember. I just didn't like it. The whole milk makes a big difference. Okay, now on to the meat. I would say the hamburger in particular, especially because I rinsed most of the fat out of it, I think it will last for years, vacuum sealed into the jar like this. The chicken, since I didn't rinse it, maybe not, we'll see. I'm really still experimenting with these. These I've had dried and vacuum sealed for a couple months, and I did open one of the jars of chicken to work through it, and it was still good, but I noticed it didn't have that crispiness to it that it had when I put it in the jar. But the chicken was still very tasty, and I did use it in a meal. I tried using it in a fried rice. Now that, I didn't think it was going to turn out all that great, but I thought, why not just go for it? And so that was one where I tried to rehydrate it in a little bit of water and some white wine for flavor, and a little bit of Bragg's liquid aminos. And though the flavor was good, it just didn't rehydrate well enough, so it was still a little too dry. However, I still think, and I gotta try it yet, but I still think it would be good for throwing into soups, anything you're gonna cook for a little while that's a liquid, or into sauces. Like I plan to use this for mostly is something like chicken enchiladas and then cook it into the sauce, or chicken fettuccine and cook it into the white sauce. And since it's in a liquid already, it should get it so it's not so dry. Now, I keep talking about the beef jerky because this is my example here. And as you can see right here, this was made and vacuum sealed into this jar in 2016. It's still good. In fact, I talked about this in one of these meat videos. I had opened one from 2014. It was a smaller one, and it was still good. I mean, it was so tasty right out of the jar. And this was a few months ago I did that, and I loved it. To me, it tasted just as good as it did the day I stuck it in the jar. There was no mold on it. It wasn't rancid at all. So anyway, again, with the ground beef, like this, where none of these have been seasoned. I mean, jerky, the one thing about jerky is it's in a marinade, so it's got a little salt and stuff like that in it. You may want to consider with some of these, maybe even adding some salt and or maybe some powdered celery. It's going to help preserve it if you don't mind having that flavor in there. Celery is a good one because it has the natural nitrites or nitrates. I can't remember which it is, but it's all natural and it's safe. And so like you can powder up, dry and powder up your celery and put that in there, and it's not going to add a whole lot of flavor to it. So that might be a good idea to help preserve it and give it a longer shelf life. Now, when it comes to your dried things like your herbs, like I have some comfrey here. This one's not sealed yet because I still got to finish topping it off. I just have a few jars here. These are ones I'm working on filling up, like the calendula right here. Actually, I just finished filling this one up and sealed it. Pansies, I'm going to try to squeeze a few more in there. and the red clover. And this is just a small fraction of the ones that I'm dehydrating. This one I just vacuum sealed, so it's going to go back in storage. The other three I'm going to finish, and I got tons more out there I'm working on. Really, when it comes to your herbs, as long as they're fully dry, very, very dry, you should be able to crumble them. That's how dry they should be. You actually don't really even need to vacuum seal. They'll stay good in the jar for a very long time, but I do still recommend vacuum sealing it because it's going to help prevent any moisture possibly getting in there and keep them from getting stale. So really your herbs will last for a very long time. The main thing with the herbs, just like, which is really goes for any of your, whether it be pressure can, water bath can, or dried goods sealed up in jars, keeping it in a cool, dry, and dark place is what's most important, because light will degrade anything, heat will degrade these things, and then moisture. You don't want moisture getting in there. And so it's that way, if your jars do come unsealed for your dry goods, if they're in a dry place, at least that's going to keep them moist. At least you won't have so much moisture getting in there, but that's also another reason why you need to keep them vacuum sealed. So again, a lot of this, some of this stuff I'm kind of new to, so I can't give you any exact numbers. I recommend doing some research though on your own and just kind of looking it up and seeing what you can find out. So for me, I always like to experiment and see how long. And that's why I haven't dried up any more chicken yet. I've got 3 jars, one that I'm working through, and then these 2, and then 2 that are full like this. And I'm going to work through those first and see by the time I get to the bottom of it is still good. And if it is, then I'll do a whole bunch more of that. And same thing with the ground beef. So far with the ground beef, no difference. This has been staying preserved really, really well. And I am currently working through a jar. And when I take out what I need, I just reseal it. And it seems to be working great that way. So I'll definitely be doing a lot of ground, not just beef, but ground venison, ground elk, all that kind of stuff. Anything I need to get out of the freezer to make room, just brown it up, dehydrate it, put it in a jar. So anyway, if you're interested in the video I did on this or the video I did on the chicken, I'll link to those both below. By the way, the chicken one is of this and that video, but I did try to start it off with the main topic of the chicken. Be watching for a lot more of these Q&A videos coming out, and I do have a lot more already out. I'll link to that playlist down below as well. All right, well, thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.